Welcome back, everyone, to another explainer. We're diving straight into the hidden mechanics of storytelling today. We're going to look at exactly how writers manipulate our psychological emotions without us ever, consciously realizing it. It's basically a masterclass in the architecture of feeling. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the art of showing, move into T.S. Eliot's famous emotional formula, and then learn how to actually spot this technique in the wild. And finally, we're going to anchor the whole thing in an absolutely brilliant case study from George Orwell's classic 1984.
All right, section 1, the art of showing. Let's get right into it.
Now think about this for a second. If you're a writer and you want to convey complex emotions, you could just come out and say, Sarah was lonely. But, that's a direct statement. It rarely makes us actually feel anything, right? So how do you make the reader experience that isolation? Well, you do it using only physical details. Imagine a character entering an empty house. You hear only the ticking of a clock. You see an untouched dinner plate, maybe a dusty family photograph. The writer literally never uses the word lonely, but your brain immediately feels the isolation. And that brings us to the formal definition. This technique, it's called the objective correlative. It's the idea that inner emotions absolutely need external, physical equivalents to be truly felt by an audience. The emotion is inside the character, sure, but the object or situation is outside. The writer's job is to connect the two. Moving on to section 2, Eliot's emotional formula. Where did this concept actually come from? The term is most famously associated with the highly influential poet and critic T.S. Eliot. He outlined this in his 1919 essay, Hamlet and His Problems. And what's really fascinating here is that Eliot, who was very much an anti-romantic critic, actually argued that Shakespeare's Hamlet was an artistic failure in this specific regard. No way, right? But he believed Hamlet was burdened with intense, repressed emotions that far exceeded the actual facts of the play. Basically, he thought Shakespeare failed to find an adequate external equivalent for Hamlet's feelings. So, to fix this problem in art, Eliot essentially created a math equation for emotion. His formula requires an object plus a situation plus an event. When these external facts are handed to the reader, the sensory experience immediately evokes the intended emotional response. It's an exact formula. The crucial point is captured right in Eliot's own words. He firmly believed that a poet can't just beam emotions or ideas directly from their own head into a reader's mind. It's impossible. There absolutely must be a carefully crafted mediation of physical elements.
Okay, section 3, spotting the correlative. Now that we have the academic framework down, let's shift gears a bit.
I want to give you some rapid-fire comparisons so you can easily spot the boundaries of this device. Let's look at the difference. A direct statement is just, the soldier was afraid. It tells us the emotion, but it's completely flat. Now, the objective correlative approach is, the soldier heard footsteps outside the door. The lamp flickered, and the corridor became silent. See the difference? The external circumstances literally force you to experience the suspense and dread. The environment itself is doing the emotional work. Now, you also need to distinguish this from the pathetic fallacy. The pathetic fallacy gives human feelings to nature, like saying, the angry storm attacked the village. But the objective correlative doesn't give the storm human feelings. Instead, if a character is furiously angry and the writer creates a violent storm outside as an external equivalent to strictly mirror that character's internal conflict, that is the objective correlative. Let's jump into section 4, case study, 1984. We're going to see how an author brilliantly sustains this concept over the course of an entire novel. We are, of course, looking at George Orwell's 1984. Specifically, we're diving into some fantastic scholarship that details how Orwell used a seemingly trivial, kind of gross, physical ailment to map a character's deep internal psychological rebellion against a totalitarian state. So, our protagonist, Winston Smith, lives in the hyper-oppressive state of Oceania, and he suffers from this varicose ulcer just above his right ankle. Now, you gotta understand, this isn't just a random medical detail. Orwell mentions this exact phrase, varicose ulcer, 8 distinct times in the novel, and he places it in highly specific situations to precisely track Winston's rebellious subconscious. Which brings us to section 5, Winston's varicose ulcer. Let's look at the timeline. We're going to dive deep into the visceral reality of this ulcer as a direct physical barometer for Winston's treason. Look at how perfectly the physical tracks the mental here.
We start with itching during his hesitant rebellion. Then, as he takes active steps against the party, it upgrades to throbbing. Then the pain mysteriously subsides when he feels safe with Julia. But when he's captured and tortured, it becomes a peeling, inflamed mass. And finally, when his mind is broken, the ulcer is cured. Let's look a little closer at these stages.
Early in the novel, Winston desperately wants to write in a forbidden diary. He's paralyzed by nauseating fear, just staring at a blank page. And what happens? The ulcer begins itching unbearably. He doesn't dare scratch it, just as he doesn't dare write a single letter. Later, the pain escalates to a steady throbbing, kind of like a rapid heartbeat. And this happens exactly when Winston boldly skips his mandatory community center activities to wander the pavements alone. The pain is literally a harbinger, embodying the sheer danger of his rebellious thoughts.
But wait, here's the really fascinating part. There's an actual medical contradiction here. In the middle of the novel, Winston meets Julia in a hidden attic. He finally feels safe. He even abandons his gin habit. And miraculously, the pain of the ulcer subsides entirely. But the text notes Winston is actually gaining weight during this time. Medically speaking, extra weight places more pressure on veins, which should exponentially increase the pain of an ulcer. This contradiction proves that the ulcer isn't just a bodily ailment, it is purely an objective correlative for his internal emotional state.
And this brilliantly sets up the climax. When Winston is finally captured and dragged into the Ministry of Love, his physical and psychological torture causes the ulcer to turn into an inflamed mass with flakes of skin peeling off it. It's graphic, but this horrific physical state perfectly illustrates the extreme clash between his inner independence and the party's forceful, brutal purging of his mind. Then comes the chilling detente. In room 101, right before the final psychological break, the party interrogator O'Brien provides Winston with proper food, clean clothes, and notably, a soothing ointment for his ulcer. O'Brien tells him everyone is cured sooner or later. The physical treatment of the ulcer perfectly aligns with O'Brien curing Winston of his rebellious ideology. When the rebellion ends, the ulcer entirely vanishes from the narrative. And just to prove how unbelievably intentional Orwell was with his wording, look at this comparison. Orwell carefully distinguishes the varicose ulcer, the symbol of deep political rebellion, from varicose veins. He only uses the term varicose veins twice in the entire book, and both times it has absolutely nothing to do with rebellion. Instead, he uses it to evoke ordinary feelings of age, physical shame, and self-reproach when Winston is undressing in front of the younger, beautiful Julia. The words themselves are chosen to evoke entirely different emotional responses. Okay, section 6. Why the correlative matters. Let's wrap up by pulling back and looking at the broader impact of all of this. Why does this matter to us as readers? It matters because it reveals the absolute core of the narrative without spelling it out for us. In 1984, a character named Syme defines the party's concept of orthodoxy as not needing to think or simply unconsciousness. Because physical pain is an immediately conscious sensation, the absolute absence of Winston's ulcer pain at the end of the novel physically represents the tragic triumph of orthodoxy. His pain is gone for good, but you know what? So is his conscious, rebellious thought. The absence of the physical object equals the absence of the mind. Once you see the objective correlative, I promise you, you can't unsee it. It changes the whole way you absorb stories. So I'll leave you with this. Next time you're reading and you feel a character's deep pain, intense joy, or crippling fear, stop. Look at the setting. Ask yourself what seemingly innocent object in the room is secretly doing all the heavy lifting. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep looking for the hidden structures in everything you read.